Come back here, boy. Don't do this. The 5-year-old sitting on the ledge of the 40-story rooftop turned his small head, tears glistening on his dark cheeks. His tiny legs dangled over the edge as he looked back at the man in the expensive suit running toward him. "If I jump and die, I go to heaven, mister. My grandma told me there's no hungry there." Billionaire David Sterling's heart shattered as he approached slowly, his hands raised. The wind whipped across the rooftop, and his helicopter sat silent behind him, rotors still. "Son, what's your name?" "Marcus," the little boy whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Mama cries 'cause we got no food. Grandma said in heaven, nobody cries." David knelt down, his voice breaking. "Marcus, I'm David. I need you to come sit with me, okay? Away from the edge." The child's innocent eyes met his. "You promise heaven is real?" "I promise you'll never be hungry again if you trust me right now." Something in David's desperate voice reached through Marcus's pain. Slowly, the 5-year-old scooted back from the ledge and let David wrap him in his arms. This moment changed everything. If you believe some encounters are meant to happen, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments about a time someone appeared in your life exactly when you needed them most. Because what you're about to hear will restore your faith in human connection. David's hands shook as he buckled Marcus into the helicopter's passenger seat. The little boy stared wide-eyed at the city sprawling below them, his small frame swimming in David's suit jacket. "We're really flying?" Marcus asked, his earlier despair momentarily replaced by wonder. "We're going to see your mama," David said, adjusting his headset. "Can you tell me where you live?" Marcus gave him an address that made David's pilot exchange a worried glance with his boss. They were heading to the most dangerous part of the city, where David's company owned several buildings, but where he'd never personally set foot. 20 minutes later, their helicopter landed in a small park surrounded by crumbling apartment complexes. The contrast was jarring. $1 million aircraft touching down in a neighborhood where broken streetlights and boarded windows told stories of forgotten dreams. "That one," Marcus pointed to a 5-story building with peeling paint and fire escapes that looked ready to collapse. "3rd floor." David followed the child through a maze of narrow hallways that smelled of mold and desperation. When they reached apartment 3C, Marcus knocked with his tiny fist. "Baby, is that you?" A young woman's voice called out, followed by multiple locks clicking open. The door revealed Sarah Martinez, 26 years old, wearing a faded waitress uniform from a diner that had closed 3 months ago. Her beauty was evident, despite exhaustion lines around her eyes, and when she saw her son with a strange man in an expensive suit, protective instincts flared. "Marcus, who is this?" "Mama, this is David." "He has a helicopter." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she pulled her son close. "Sir, I don't know what—" "Ma'am, your son was on a rooftop today. He was—" David's voice caught. "He was trying to go to heaven because he said you were hungry." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her knees buckled slightly, and she had to grip the doorframe. "Oh my God. Marcus, baby, what did you do?" "I wanted to help, Mama. I wanted to make it so you don't cry no more." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she knelt and hugged her son. David stood awkwardly in the hallway, feeling like an intruder in this moment of raw pain and love. "Please," David said quietly, "can I come in? I'd like to help." Sarah's apartment was smaller than David's closet. A folding table served as both dining room and desk, where financial textbooks were stacked alongside unpaid bills. The refrigerator hummed loudly, but contained only a nearly empty carton of milk and some bread. "You're studying finance?" David asked, noticing the textbooks. Sarah's cheeks burned with shame. "Got my degree 3 years ago, 3.9 GPA, summa cum laude, but apparently nobody wants to hire someone from this address." She gestured around the sparse apartment. "I've been waiting tables, cleaning offices, anything to keep the lights on. But work's been slow, and Marcus—" She looked at her son playing with a toy car, missing 2 wheels. "He's so young. He shouldn't have to see me fall apart." David felt something crack inside his chest. Here was brilliant potential being wasted because of circumstances beyond anyone's control. I own Sterling Financial Group. We need talented analysts. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate you bringing my son home, but I've heard promises before. This isn't charity, this is business. When can you start? The room fell silent, except for the humming refrigerator and Marcus making soft engine noises with his broken toy. Sarah stared at this stranger, who'd appeared in their darkest hour like an answered prayer. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for us?" David looked at Marcus, remembering the child's words about heaven having no hunger. "Because sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in front of you when you need them most." Monday morning at Sterling Financial Group was overwhelming. Sarah stood outside the gleaming 40-story tower, her hands shaking as she clutched a folder with her resume. She wore her best outfit, a blazer from Goodwill and shoes she'd polished until they almost looked new. The elevator to the 35th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, she entered a world of chrome and glass that seemed designed to intimidate. Original artwork lined the walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that literally took her breath away. "Sarah Martinez," a sharp voice called out. Jennifer Walsh, head of HR, approached with a smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. "Mr. Sterling asked me to get you oriented." The tour was a masterclass in subtle condescension. Jennifer's tone remained professionally polite while making it clear that Sarah didn't belong. "This is our main analysis floor. Everyone here has MBAs from Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, the top tier. But I'm sure you'll find your place somehow." Sarah's desk was in the far corner, isolated from the executive offices. Her computer was older than the others, her chair squeaked, and she could feel curious eyes following her every move. Whispered conversations stopped when she walked by, and accidental coffee spills seemed to happen near her workspace with suspicious frequency. But Sarah had survived worse than workplace politics. She arrived early, stayed late, and dove deep into financial reports with the hunger of someone who'd fought for everything. While her colleagues saw numbers, Sarah saw patterns, stories, and most importantly, the truth. It was during her third week that she noticed something disturbing in the quarterly reports. The numbers didn't match. Sarah stared at her screen, cross-referencing data from different departments. Money was moving in ways that violated every principle she'd learned in school. Complex transactions seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify, and funds were disappearing into a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. She pulled up more reports, going back months, then years. The pattern became clear and terrifying. Someone was systematically stealing from client accounts, targeting pension funds, charity organizations, and elderly investors who trusted Sterling Financial with their life savings. "Working late again, Martinez?" Sarah jumped. Marcus Sterling, David's business partner and closest friend, stood behind her desk. Despite sharing David's last name, they were opposites. Where David was genuine, Marcus was calculating. Where David showed compassion, Marcus displayed cold ambition. "Just finishing some analysis, Mr. Sterling," Sarah replied, quickly minimizing her screens. "Call me Marcus. We're all family here." His hand touched her shoulder, and she suppressed a shudder. "David speaks highly of you. Says you have a gift for seeing patterns others miss." "I try to be thorough." Marcus leaned closer, his expensive cologne overwhelming. "Sometimes, Sarah, being too thorough can be problematic, especially when you're new, still proving yourself." The threat was unmistakable. After he left, Sarah sat in the empty office, her mind racing. She saved everything to a secure drive, taking screenshots of the damning evidence. The scope of the fraud was staggering, tens of millions stolen from people who could least afford to lose it. Her phone buzzed at 9 p.m., a text from Marcus. "Hope you got home safely. These streets can be dangerous for someone in your position." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She thought about her son, about the job that had seemed like salvation but might now be a death sentence. That night Sarah barely slept. She kept thinking about Marcus Sterling's cold eyes and veiled threats, about the millions of stolen dollars, and about her son, asking why she looked scared. "Mama, did I do something bad by going to that roof?" 5-year-old Marcus asked over breakfast the next morning. "No, baby. You were hurting, and sometimes when people hurt they don't think clearly. But you can always talk to Mama, okay? Is the nice man going to take care of us like he promised?" Sarah's heart ached. How could she explain that the nice man might not even know his best friend was a criminal? That the job meant to save them might destroy them? At work, she tried to act normal, but Marcus Sterling watched her constantly. Every time she looked up, he was there. In meetings she wasn't part of, standing near her desk, appearing in elevators when she least expected it. During lunch, she made a decision that terrified her. She needed to tell David the truth, but Marcus's office was right next to his. One wrong move, and she could lose everything, or worse. She waited until 6 p.m. when most employees had left. David's office light was still on, and she could see him through the glass walls, reviewing documents. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "Sarah, come in. How are you settling in?" David's genuine warmth made her task even harder. How do you tell someone their best friend is betraying them? "Mr. Sterling, I need to show you something, but first I need you to know I have a son to think about. If I'm wrong about this, Sarah, whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." She handed him the flash drive with shaking hands. "I found irregularities in our client accounts, money moving through shell companies, unauthorized transfers to offshore accounts. The pattern goes back years." David's face grew grave as he reviewed the evidence. With each document, his expression darkened. This is massive theft. Sarah, who else knows about this?" "Just me. But Mr. Sterling, Marcus Sterling, your partner, he approached me yesterday. He seemed to know I was looking into something." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. David's face went pale and he sank into his chair. "Marcus? No, there has to be an explanation. He's my oldest friend. We built this company together. He's like a brother to me." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I know this must be. Show me everything, every transaction, every account. If Marcus is involved," David's voice broke, "if he's stealing from our clients, from people who trust us, then friendship doesn't matter anymore." They worked through the night, following the money trail. Each piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Marcus Sterling had been systematically looting the company for over 5 years. The stolen amount totaled nearly $50 million. As dawn broke over the city, David made the hardest decision of his life. "We go to the authorities today," he said, his voice hollow. "But Sarah, you need to be careful. If Marcus realizes what we know, there's something else," Sarah said quietly. "According to these transfer schedules, he's planning to move the remaining funds to untraceable accounts. We have less than 48 hours before it's all gone forever." The next day felt like walking through a minefield. Sarah tried to act normal, while David struggled to maintain his composure around his oldest friend. Marcus seemed more agitated than usual, making frequent phone calls and spending long periods in his office with the door closed. At 3 p.m., David's secretary buzzed him. "Mr. Sterling, there's been an urgent request from the Financial Crimes Unit. They want to review some account records immediately." Sarah's blood ran cold. Someone had tipped off the authorities, but was it David keeping his word or Marcus covering his tracks? 20 minutes later, federal agents walked through the Sterling financial offices. Employees whispered nervously as badges were flashed and documents were seized. Sarah tried to stay calm, but her hands shook as she watched the investigation unfold. Marcus appeared at her desk, his face a mask of concern that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Terrible business, isn't it? All these accusations flying around. I hope no one has been overzealous in their analysis of company records." I don't know what you mean, Sarah replied, but her voice betrayed her fear. Of course you don't. You're new here, still learning how things work. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Sarah, I've been thinking about your situation. Single mother, criminal neighborhood, son with behavioral issues. It would be such a shame if Child Protective Services received an anonymous call about an unfit parent. The threat hit her like a physical blow. He wasn't just threatening her job. He was threatening to take Marcus away from her. You understand me, don't you? Marcus continued, his smile never wavering. Some secrets are better left buried, for everyone's sake. After he walked away, Sarah sat frozen at her desk. She thought about her son's innocent question that morning. Is the nice man going to take care of us? The nice man was trying to, but the evil one held all the cards. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Meet me on the roof at 8 p.m. Same building where we first met Marcus. It's time to end this. Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. The same rooftop where her 5-year-old son had nearly jumped, looking for heaven because earth had become unbearable. Now she would return there to face a different kind of hell. The rooftop at sunset was eerily beautiful. The same spot where little Marcus had sat on the ledge now served as the stage for a confrontation that would determine multiple futures. David stood near his helicopter, which sat silent against the golden sky. Sarah arrived first, clutching the backup evidence she'd hidden at home. The wind whipped her hair as she remembered finding her son in this exact spot just weeks ago, ready to give up on life because he thought it was the only way to help her. Sarah. Marcus Sterling's voice cut through the wind as he stepped onto the rooftop, followed by David. I thought we might find you here. The three of them formed a triangle on the rooftop, with decades of friendship and trust on one side, and truth and justice on the other. David looked older than his years, the weight of betrayal etched in every line of his face. Marcus, David said, his voice heavy with grief. I've seen the evidence, all of it. $50 million stolen from people who trusted us. Elderly retirees, charities, pension funds. How could you? Marcus's charming facade finally cracked, revealing the cold predator beneath. How could I? David, we built this empire together, but who gets called the golden boy? Who gets profiled in magazines while I do the real work? You want to talk about theft? You stole my recognition for 20 years. So you decided to steal money instead? I decided to take what I deserved. Marcus's voice rose to a shout. Those clients were sheep, and sheep exist to be sheared. You were always too soft to understand that. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear despite her fear. Those sheep include an 80-year-old woman who lost her entire pension, a children's cancer charity that can't fund treatments now, real people with real lives that you destroyed. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humanity. The little welfare queen thinks she has moral authority? Sarah, you're a roach who crawled out of the gutter. You should be grateful I let you see how real power works. The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah felt every insult she'd endured her entire life crystallize in that moment. Every person who judged her by her address, her skin color, her circumstances. But she also thought of her son, of his innocent belief that heaven existed somewhere beyond the pain. You're right, she said quietly. I am from the gutter. I know what it's like to choose between rent and food, to watch your child go hungry, to feel like the world has forgotten you exist. That's exactly why I can't let you keep stealing from people like me. David stepped between them, his face a mask of anguish. Marcus, it doesn't have to end this way. Return the money. We'll work something out. Our friendship. Our friendship. Marcus pulled out a gun, his hand steady despite his rage. David, you naive fool. There was never a friendship. There was just you being useful and me waiting for the right moment to take everything. The revelation shattered something in David's eyes. Sarah watched as 20 years of trust and brotherhood crumbled in an instant. The man who'd saved her son, who'd offered hope when there was none, now stood face to face with the ultimate betrayal. The money transfers to the Cayman accounts in 6 hours, Marcus continued, the gun trained on David. By tomorrow, I'll be on a beach somewhere, and Sterling Financial will collapse under the weight of scandal. The only question is whether you two die here tonight, or if I let you live to take the blame. The wind picked up, howling across the rooftop like the voice of judgment itself. Below them, the city sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing a life, a dream, a hope for something better. Sarah thought of her son's words. If I jump and die, I go to heaven. But standing here now, she realized heaven wasn't a place you reached by giving up. It was something you fought to create on earth, one act of courage at a time. Marcus, she said, her voice cutting through the wind, you're wrong about one thing. What's that, sweetheart? You said I'm a roach from the gutter, but roaches survive. No matter what you do to us, no matter how hard you try to crush us, we find a way to survive and keep fighting. And right now, every major news outlet in the city has copies of your financial records. Marcus's face went white. You're lying. This morning, while you were threatening my son, I was emailing everything to journalists, FBI field offices, and the Securities Exchange Commission. Your Cayman Island transfers, they've been frozen. Your shell companies, under investigation. You're done. The gun in Marcus's hand began to shake as the reality of his situation sank in. David stepped forward, his voice filled with sadness, but also resolve. It's over, Marcus. Let's end this with whatever dignity we have left. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau of betrayal, justice, and redemption. Then Marcus's hand steadied, his finger moving to the trigger. If I'm going down, he whispered, I'm taking you both with me. The helicopter rotors began spinning behind them, the sound growing louder as David's pilot prepared for an emergency takeoff. Sarah realized David had planned for this possibility. He'd known his oldest friend might choose violence over accountability. Marcus, don't do this, David pleaded one last time. Think about who you used to be. Remember when we started this company? We wanted to help people build better futures. I remember being young and stupid, Marcus replied, his voice empty of remorse. But I grew up. I learned that the only person who'll take care of you is yourself. Then you learned wrong. The voice came from behind them. Sarah turned to see federal agents emerging from the stairwell, weapons drawn. Her anonymous tips hadn't just gone to journalists. She'd also contacted the FBI directly. Marcus Sterling, drop your weapon. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Everything happened in slow motion. Marcus's eyes darted between the agents, David and Sarah. For just a moment, she saw something almost human flicker across his face. Regret, maybe, or recognition of the man he used to be. Then the moment passed, and his grip tightened on the gun. If I can't have the money, at least I can have revenge. The shot rang out across the rooftop, echoing off the surrounding buildings. But it wasn't Marcus who fired. Agent Rodriguez, the lead investigator, had taken the shot to save David's life. Marcus collapsed to the concrete, clutching his shoulder, his weapon skittering away across the rooftop. As paramedics and additional agents flooded the scene, Sarah found herself standing at the exact spot where her son had nearly given up on life. The irony wasn't lost on her. In the place where despair had almost won, justice had finally prevailed. David approached her as Marcus was loaded onto a stretcher, his face a mixture of relief and profound sadness. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I brought you into this mess, put you and Marcus in danger. No, she interrupted. You gave us hope when we had none. You saw worth in people the world had written off. That's not something to apologize for. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching the city lights twinkle below. The helicopter waited patiently, its rotors spinning slowly, ready to carry them away from this place of confrontation toward whatever came next. What happens now? Sarah asked. David was quiet for a long moment. Now we rebuild. We return every stolen dollar to the people Marcus robbed. We restore trust in the company, and we make sure something like this never happens again. And my job? David turned to her with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all day. "Sarah, you just saved this company and probably countless innocent investors. I was thinking more along the lines of a promotion. Chief Financial Officer has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears as the weight of everything crashed over her. Weeks ago, she'd been a struggling single mother watching her son consider suicide because they had no food. Now she stood on a rooftop where justice had triumphed, with a career that would ensure her child never went hungry again. "There's just one thing," she said, wiping away her tears. "What's that?" "I need to pick up my son from daycare. He's probably wondering where his mama is." David laughed, the first genuine laugh either of them had shared since this ordeal began. "Sarah, would you and Marcus like a ride home in a helicopter?" The helicopter lifted off from the rooftop as the last of the emergency vehicles departed below. Sarah sat beside David, watching the city spread out beneath them like a blanket of possibilities. Her phone had been buzzing with texts from reporters and federal agents, but she ignored them all. Right now, only one person mattered. They landed in the same small park where David had first brought her son home weeks ago. The contrast felt surreal. Then, she'd been a desperate woman letting a stranger into her life out of sheer hope. Now, she was a woman transformed, with the power to ensure other families never faced the desperation that had nearly claimed her child. Marcus ran out of the community center where she'd left him, his small face lighting up when he saw the helicopter. "Mama! Mr. David, did you catch the bad guys like on TV?" Sarah knelt and pulled her son into her arms, inhaling his sweet scent and feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest. "Yes, baby. The bad guys can't hurt anyone anymore. Does that mean we don't have to be scared about food?" David knelt beside them, his expensive suit rumpled from the day's events, but his eyes bright with something Sarah had rarely seen in wealthy men: genuine humility. "Marcus, your mama is going to have a very important job now. You'll never have to worry about being hungry again." The little boy looked between them with the serious expression children get when they sense something momentous is happening. "Mr. David, when I was on that roof, I thought heaven was the only place where people didn't cry from being hungry. What do you think now?" David asked gently. Marcus considered this with 5-year-old wisdom. "I think maybe we can make heaven happen right here, with good people helping other good people." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at her son. This child who'd faced despair so deep he'd been willing to leave the world, but who still believed in the possibility of goodness. "You're right, baby," she whispered. "Heaven isn't a place we go. It's something we build together." David stood up, brushing dust off his knees. The man who'd started this day as a billionaire, isolated in his tower of wealth, was ending it as someone who understood that true richness came from connection, from seeing the humanity in others, from using privilege to lift people up instead of hoarding it. "Sarah, there's something else. The reward money from the FBI for recovering the stolen funds, it's substantial. But I was thinking, instead of keeping it, we could start a foundation, help families like yours. Make sure no child ever has to stand on a rooftop looking for heaven because earth has become unbearable." Sarah looked at this man who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers she'd been afraid to pray. "What would we call it?" Little Marcus tugged on David's suit jacket. "Call it Hope Foundation, 'cause that's what you gave us when we didn't have any." The three of them stood together in the small park as the helicopter pilot waited patiently for instructions. Around them, the sounds of the neighborhood continued. Children playing, families calling each other home for dinner, life persisting in all its messy, beautiful complexity. "So what happens tomorrow?" Sarah asked. David smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes completely. "Tomorrow, we start building heaven on earth, one family at a time." 6 months later, Sarah Martinez Sterling, she'd taken David's last name when he adopted her and Marcus as family, stood in the gleaming offices of Sterling Financial Group, but this time as Chief Financial Officer. The view from her corner office, yes, corner office, showed the same city, but everything looked different now. The company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived under new leadership focused on ethical practices and community investment. The Hope Foundation had already helped over 200 families, providing everything from job training to emergency food assistance to educational scholarships. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Little Marcus, now 6 and full of confidence, bounded into the office wearing his school uniform. "Mama, guess what I learned in school today?" "What's that, baby?" "We learned about superheroes. And I told everyone that you and Uncle David are real superheroes, 'cause you save people from being hungry and scared." Sarah's heart swelled as she looked at her son, the same child who'd once sat on a rooftop, ready to give up on the world. Now, he talked about superheroes and helping people, his eyes bright with the kind of hope that only comes from seeing good triumph over evil. "Speaking of Uncle David," she said, "he should be here any minute for our foundation meeting." As if summoned by her words, David appeared in the doorway. The man who'd once been consumed by the emptiness of wealth had found purpose in using his resources to create genuine change. The lines of grief from Marcus Sterling's betrayal were still visible on his face, but they were now accompanied by deeper lines of joy and satisfaction. "Ready to review the quarterly impact reports?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Actually," Sarah said, a mischievous smile playing on her lips, "I have a better idea. Marcus, want to show Uncle David what we've been working on?" The little boy's face lit up as he ran to Sarah's desk and pulled out a large poster board covered in crayon drawings and carefully written words. "It's a map," Marcus announced proudly. "A map showing all the families we've helped and where they live now. See, this red house is the Johnsons. They got jobs and moved to a safer neighborhood. And this blue apartment is Mrs. Rodriguez. We helped her when her husband got sick." David studied the colorful map with the seriousness he once reserved for multi-million-dollar deals. Each crayon mark represented a real family, real lives that had been changed through their work together. "This is beautiful, Marcus, but you know what I think we need?" "What?" "I think we need a helicopter tour to visit some of these families, see how they're doing in person." Marcus jumped up and down with excitement. "Really? In the real helicopter?" "The real helicopter," David confirmed, laughing at the boy's enthusiasm. As they prepared to leave for their afternoon visits, Sarah paused at her office window one more time. Somewhere out there was a rooftop where despair had almost won, where a 5-year-old child had looked for heaven because earth seemed too hard to bear. But heaven, she'd learned, wasn't a place you escaped to. It was a promise you kept to each other, one act of compassion at a time. It was seeing a child's potential instead of their circumstances. It was choosing justice over loyalty when integrity demanded it. It was using privilege to lift others up instead of keeping them down. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of the families they'd helped. "Miss Sarah, wanted you to know Tommy got accepted to college with the scholarship you set up. He says he wants to study finance like you and help other families someday. Thank you for showing us that angels are real. They just look like regular people doing extraordinary things." Sarah smiled, tucking the phone away, as David and Marcus waited for her by the elevator. "Ready?" David asked. She looked at her son, healthy and confident and full of dreams for the future. She looked at David, a man who discovered that true wealth came from relationships and purpose rather than bank accounts, and she thought about all the families out there who were getting second chances because 3 people had met on a rooftop where despair had almost won, but hope had triumphed instead. "Ready," she said. The elevator doors closed behind them as they descended toward the lobby, toward the helicopter, toward whatever family needed them today. Above them, the afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, casting long shadows that looked almost like wings spread wide across the empty conference room. Outside, somewhere in the city, another child was probably looking up at the sky and wondering if anyone cared whether they lived or died. But now, because of what had started on that rooftop, there were people actively working to make sure that child and countless others would find their answer not in escape, but in the determined love of a community that refused to let anyone fall through the cracks. Heaven, it turned out, was right here all along. It just took the right people at the right moment with the right hearts to help everyone else see it. The same rooftop where it all began now hosted a very different kind of gathering. A small ceremony was taking place, with city officials, local families and news crews present to witness the dedication of the Marcus Martinez Community Center, named after a 7-year-old boy who taught the world that hope could be found in the most unlikely places. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, "it gives me great pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for today's dedication, Sarah Martinez Sterling, Chief Financial Officer of Sterling Financial Group and co-founder of the Hope Foundation." Sarah stepped to the podium, her son Marcus beside her, and David nearby with tears of pride in his eyes. Below them, the city sprawled in all directions, but now she could see it differently, not as a maze of inequality and despair, but as a canvas of possibility. "2 years ago," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the rooftop, "a little boy stood on this very spot and asked a simple question: where is heaven? He'd been taught that heaven was a place you go when you die, a place without hunger or pain or tears." She paused, looking down at Marcus, who beamed up at her with confidence and joy. "Today, I want to tell you what that little boy taught me. Heaven isn't a destination, it's a decision. It's the decision to see dignity in every human being. It's the decision to use whatever privileges you have to lift others up. It's the decision to believe that no one, not one person, is disposable." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "This community center will serve over 500 families in its first year. It will provide job training, childcare, educational support, and most importantly, hope. But none of that would exist if 3 strangers hadn't met on this rooftop and decided that despair would not have the final word." She gestured to David, who stepped forward with characteristic humility. Mr. David Sterling could have saved 1 child that day and felt good about his charity. Instead, he chose to see an entire community that deserved investment, respect, and opportunity. He chose to build heaven right here on earth. The applause was thunderous, but David's attention was focused entirely on little Marcus, who was tugging on his suit jacket. "Uncle David," the boy whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Look!" He pointed to the sky, where David's helicopter was approaching for a flyover ceremony. But that wasn't what had caught Marcus's attention. A rainbow had appeared in the afternoon sky, its colors brilliant against the urban landscape. "See," Marcus announced to the crowd with 7-year-old authority, "heaven is everywhere if you know how to look for it." The crowd laughed and applauded as the helicopter passed overhead, trailing a banner that read, "Hope Foundation, building heaven on earth, one family at a time." As the ceremony concluded and people began to explore the new community center, Sarah found herself standing at the exact spot where her son had once sat on the ledge, ready to give up on the world. Now, children played safely in the rooftop garden that had been installed, their laughter mixing with the sounds of families reuniting and volunteers organizing programs. David approached her, carrying a small plaque. "I had this made for the memorial wall downstairs," he said, showing her the inscription, "In memory of despair, in celebration of hope. Sometimes heaven is as close as a stranger's kindness." "Perfect," Sarah said, then added with a smile, "though I have one small edit." "What's that?" "Sometimes heaven is as close as a stranger's kindness, but more often it's as close as your willingness to be kind to a stranger." They stood together on the rooftop as the sun set over the city, watching Marcus play with other children in the garden where he'd once nearly ended his life. The transformation was complete, not just of the space, but of everyone who'd been touched by what happened here. That night, As Sarah tucked Marcus into bed in their comfortable new home, he asked her the same question he'd asked every night for 2 years. "Mama, are you happy?" "Yes, baby. Are you?" "Yeah." "Mama?" "What, sweetheart?" "I'm glad I didn't jump that day. I'm glad I waited to see what heaven on earth looks like." Sarah kissed his forehead and turned off the light, but not before noticing the drawing on his nightstand, a colorful picture of a rooftop with a rainbow overhead and 3 people holding hands. At the bottom, in careful second-grade handwriting, he'd written, "The day we found heaven." Outside his window, the city hummed with life. Millions of people going about their evening routines, most unaware that somewhere among them, hope was being built one decision at a time, one act of compassion at a time, one refused surrender at a time. And on a rooftop across town, David Sterling stood alone for a moment, looking up at the stars and thinking about friendship, betrayal, redemption, and the strange way the universe sometimes puts exactly the right people in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Thank you for teaching us that angels are real. They just look like billionaires with helicopters who care more about people than profit." He typed back, "Thank you for teaching me that miracles are real. They just look like brilliant women who refuse to let circumstances define their worth." Then, because it felt like the right thing to do, he added, "Heaven is real too. It just looks like a little boy who chose to live long enough to change the world." The story that began with a question about heaven had become its own answer. Heaven isn't a place you go, it's a promise you keep, a kindness you share, a hope you refuse to abandon, and a love that insists no one is too small, too poor, or too forgotten to matter. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it wears a $1,000 suit and flies a helicopter. Sometimes it looks like a single mother with a finance degree and the courage to speak truth to power. But most often, it looks like people, ordinary, flawed, beautiful people, choosing to see each other as worthy of dignity, respect, and hope. And that choice, made over and over again, by people who could have looked away but didn't, who could have stayed comfortable but chose compassion instead. That choice is what transforms rooftops of despair into gardens of hope. The helicopter that once carried a desperate billionaire to save a suicidal child now carries supplies to families in need. The rooftop that once echoed with a child's cry for heaven now rings with children's laughter. The woman who once thought her brilliance would never be recognized now mentors dozens of others climbing out of poverty through education and opportunity. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that every person you meet is fighting battles you can't see, then please subscribe to this channel and share this message. Comment below about a time someone saw your worth when you couldn't see it yourself. Or better yet, tell us about a time you chose to be someone else's unexpected angel. Because the truth is, we're all just a few decisions away from standing on our own rooftops, looking for heaven. And we're all just one act of compassion away from being the reason someone else chooses to step back from the edge and build something beautiful instead. The question isn't whether miracles are real. The question is whether you're willing to be part of one. Heaven is waiting, not in some distant realm, but right here, right now, in the space between strangers becoming family, between despair transforming into hope, and between the moment someone decides your life is worth saving and the moment you decide to live it fully. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that every ending can become a new beginning, and that sometimes the most broken moments create the most beautiful stories. Because this isn't really the end. It's just the beginning of what's possible when we choose to see each other the way heaven sees us all, as worthy of love, deserving of hope, and capable of miracles. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of a world where rooftops of despair can become gardens of hope, one story at a time.